Part of being a mechanic is sometimes being able to invent your own processes or tools to get out of a sticky situation. I've got the transmission ready to go in here into Way Cool Jr. and I can't lift it with my shoulder being bad. So I built this bar here. Basically it's a piece of bed rail that I had laying around, and I drilled 2 holes for the bell housing, and I'm going to slide this jack under here to raise the transmission up. Now I'm going to stick the tail of the transmission up above the cross member first, then I'm going to get this jack under here, and that'll allow me to raise the front end enough to get my other jack in from the side, and hopefully it's got a broader pad on it, and hopefully I can use it to lift the transmission into place, slide it forward, and this could be a balancing act. So I'm going to video it while I do it. Hopefully I don't end up an internet meme or something, if I royally screw it up and drop it on my face, this video will never see the light of day. But if you're watching this, that means that I succeeded and didn't make too much of a fool of myself. So let's see where I can get. So I've got a bolt in that side of the bell housing, and I don't know if you saw, but I had a little help from my wife. She came out and worked the jack while I tried to keep the transmission level on the jack. So several years, through a little bit of marital advice, several years ago, I went to the grocery store. There's a grocery store here locally that sold flowers. It sold flowers, and I stopped by one evening to get some flowers for my wife, and I saw one of my old teachers, one of my junior high teachers there, and she looked at me and said, "Oh, somebody's in trouble." And I looked at her and said, "No, I'm not in trouble. I buy flowers for my wife so I stay out of trouble." And that was the truth. I like buying flowers for my wife from time to time. I try to stay out of trouble with her and, keep her happy, and that's important. My wife actually is, heading out to go to take care of her mom for a minute, and I caught her on the way out the door and said, "Hey, can you help me real quick before you leave?" And she was happy to do so. So marital harmony is important. You can't do stuff like this on a regular basis if you don't have the support from your spouse. I mean, you can, but it's a whole lot harder. It was really handy of her to come out and work the jack because, I can work it with my feet sometimes, but it's not as easy when you're trying to keep the transmission. It's like juggling chainsaws. If it goes wrong, it can land on your face and be painful. So anyways, got one bolt in, got the tail of the transmission sitting on top of my homemade cross member back there. And I've just got to get a bolt in this other side. And once I have a bolt in this other side securing the transmission so it can't wiggle like that, I'll work on getting the tail shaft up onto the cross member. And once I get that the rear transmission mount into the cross member, the transmission's fairly secure, and from that point it's just a matter of getting all the bolts in it and get them all snugged up and then reattaching the torque converter and all that. So I'm at a good place here now to get this done. With having that one bolt in, I'm pretty well secure, but I've got to get more done before I can take this jack out. Man, I must be living my life right. That bolt was already lined up. But then, of all the other troubles I have with vehicles, one of the things I've always been really good at, not sure why, is stabbing engines and transmissions. I've been really good about being able to get them on the mounts pretty quickly usually. So, there's that. So I have a bolt in on either side. The jack is holding up the transmission. I'm going to try to slide the jack further back to where I can lift the tail end. Then I'm going to pull the cross member forward and drop the transmission mount into the cross member hole and get the bolts for the cross member where they're supposed to be. Right now the cross member is loose, and I could slide it back and forth a bit, but it does hit the exhaust and I can only get it back so far. So all right, as I started trying to move the back of the transmission up, I noticed the transmission was tilting, but it wasn't taking the engine with it. So I really need to tighten up the bolts I have in the engine, from the transmission to the engine, and put 2 more in. And if I get those nice and tight, whenever I raise the transmission, it'll also raise the engine. It'll limit how much room I have to get the transmission tail shaft on the cross member, but I don't want to snap off the bolts that are in the transmission. Really don't want to do that. Okay, all 4 bolts are in and good and snug. Tighten about as best I can. Like I say, if you're going to put a bolt in, try to get it tight like it's supposed to be. So now I can go ahead and work on getting the tail shaft in place. But I wanted to say, I mentioned a minute ago that I've always been pretty fortunate about stabbing engines and transmissions. I think my secret to it is just pay attention to the angles of everything and kind of have, try to see where things are going to line up. And if here the transmission comes up like this and the engine comes back like that, and they meet at an angle. So I can see where the transmission is, and I'm trying to have it at the right angle where it's going to meet that back corner of the engine. And looking at that on the other side and seeing how close each side is makes it easier to get it all stabbed straight and even. As you're trying to get the transmission in place, you want to have it down that center line of the vehicle. You want to try to have it lined up and not have it cattywampus while you're trying to get it up in there. And if that's my secret, that's my secret. I just try to make sure everything's squared up as I'm meeting them together. And because of that, I don't have problems with it like other people do. So. All right, I don't know if you noticed, but I made sure everything was loose on the back end there. When I set the transmission down, got the bolts and everything, I made sure all the bolts lined up before I started snugging things up. And I know some of you are screaming, why am I using a chrome socket on an impact wrench? Well, yeah, I agree, but this is what I hate about toolkits that come with, most of the sizes you need. It used to be an 18 millimeter, wasn't that common, but you kind of need an 18 millimeter impact socket with your metric impact socket set. So, yeah, if you want to gripe about me using a chrome socket, you can. I did put my safety goggles on. I do have some, consideration for my health, but got the transmission cross member locked down now. I just got to lock down that bolt at the back, finish putting my bolts in the transmission, and from there on out, it's just a matter of bolting everything up and hooking up the wiring, making sure that everything's routed like it's supposed to, hooking up the cooler lines, and importantly, mopping up this mess here. I don't like having messes on my floor, so I'm going to pull that jack out, get it out of the way, mop up the mess, start putting the bolts in. All right, I'm reconnecting things, and I got the transmission cooler lines hooked up, and I grabbed the TV cable, and I don't have enough play to get it back to where it's supposed to go. And I knew better, should have checked it. I saw it when I was bolting things up, but I pinched the TV cable between the engine and the transmission. So now I got to loosen that bolt up and see if I can get the TV cable out and make sure that it's still working right. The TV cable is one of those things you don't want to mess up on this transmission. So I've got to pull it out and make sure it works smoothly. And if it does, I'll bolt it in and run with it. If there's any kind of hiccup in it at all, I've got to replace the TV cable. Don't ever try to finagle a TV cable to get it to work. If it works, great. If it doesn't, replace it. If you have a TV cable that hangs up or doesn't work properly, if it's not adjusted properly, you can burn up that transmission in a matter of feet. So, yeah, I got to get to work on fixing that now. Well, I mashed the throttle valve cable pretty good. It is stiff. Yep. I can't pull it very easily. So it's ruined. I'm looking here. AutoZone shows one, a universal one for 52 bucks. Can't find it at O'Reilly's. Rock Auto doesn't have it, although they have some corrector kits for if you run a carburetor. So it looks like I'm going to be going to pull apart to find a new TV cable, or a new to me TV cable. Kind of bums me out. I saw it and I knew that whenever I tightened it up, I was going to have to watch for that. And then as I was tightening it up, I didn't watch for it. So don't get distracted. Filming kind of distracts you when you're trying to do this kind of stuff. So I've got to go get one of these before I get the transmission going again. I'll probably do that tomorrow. Weather's supposed to be good again tomorrow. The following day it's supposed to get nasty, so I've got to hit pull apart tomorrow if I'm going to get a new to me TV cable. So it's time to fix dinner. So I think I'm going to call it quits for the day. I lost how much ever this is going to cost me in half hour's worth of time because I wasn't paying attention. But you know, part of this channel is this isn't to show you, oh, you could be so awesome a mechanic if you just do stuff yourself. It's to show you what it's really like being a mechanic. I've been doing this for years and I still make mistakes. All the guys do. You know, I've seen people, it looks like they can just throw, they drop the parts on the floor and the vehicle's magically assembled. But you know, what they don't show you is all the troubles they go through getting there. So I'll show you what the troubles are. I have no problem with that. So more to follow. Also, got to mention, if you can get an old TV, I got this TV for free. Somebody was getting, no, I paid for this one. I paid like 20 bucks for this one at a garage sale. And I've got a little Raspberry Pi here, or not a Raspberry Pi, but a Raspberry Pi based computer. You can get this from, it's Raspberry Pi 400. I got it from Seed Studio, Seed with 3 E's. Plugs right in, runs basically a Linux-based operating system, and you can have a TV out in your shop, or a computer out in your shop. I usually have YouTube videos playing, music playing while I'm out here working. So, quick tip there for if you need to look up parts and stuff like that while you're working, consider doing one of these setups.